Republican Senator Marco Rubio spoke out in support of Alabama Amazon workers as they seek to unionize, making him the first high-profile member of the GOP to back those workers.
So, in the op-ed, it was for USA Today, blasted Amazon today for, quote, waging a culture war against working-class values and crushing small businesses. New York Times' Jane Coaston, she joins us now to discuss this, the GOP's general stance on labor. Jane, this one, you and I have talked a little bit about, it's kind of interesting, which is that if you read the op-ed, Rubio is like, unions are mostly bad, but I hate Amazon. So in this incredibly, isolated case, I support this. Is this just the easiest way that you can get away with it without pissing off the donor class? What does this represent, do you think? You've covered these issues for a while.
I think this represents an effort at hostage taking. Hot Air's Ala Pundit made the case that, let's say Amazon were a very conservative-leaning company. There's no way Marco Rubio is saying this. There's no way this op-ed happens. This is a culture war issue that happens to involve unions. And especially because the op-ed, if you read it, doesn't really go into why Amazon workers are unionizing or into unionization writ large, which he clearly thinks is bad, except when it's Amazon, which he's angry at for other reasons.
Yeah, that was the interesting thing about this op-ed is he went into woke HR departments, et cetera. I'm like, that has nothing to do with why these workers are considering a union whatsoever. They want to be able to take breaks and not get fired, maybe have a say in their pay rate, in their health insurance, et cetera, what benefits they're provided. So you don't see it at all as I do think that there has been somewhat of a shift in terms of the posture towards unions, because you go back 10 years ago and Right to Work and Scott Walker and all these guys, there was an aggressive anti-union push. And there is still, from a practical policy perspective, those positions are all still in place. But it doesn't seem like it's as much of a sort of base motivator as it used to be.
I think that it's worth noting at where that rhetoric is coming from, because this is not about support for unions. This is not about support for unions in, say, the Writers Guild of America. This is not about the unions that are representing service industry workers. This is about the fact that the companies that Republicans and conservatives had long felt were their biggest beneficiaries, and side note, still are, that they don't feel as if they have the same quid pro quo with them. They don't feel as if they have the same relationship they used to have with Apple or Amazon or big companies writ large. And so I think that this is an effort to shore up their populist bona fides without actually having to do anything. No one's talking about Fight for 15. Nobody's talking about the fact that Amazon workers endure extreme conditions. And I think that there's been a lot of really great reporting in The Intercept and elsewhere on those issues. But this is about the fact that Amazon didn't stop selling a book that Marco Rubio wants them to keep selling, or that Amazon has gotten involved in a lot of culture war issues, which, side note, corporate activism is something that conservatives were okay with when it was for them, but now they're not okay with it because it's not for them, because that's how everything works now. But I do see this as largely about a culture war issue. If there was if there's a big company that says, we're going to fire all of these people or we're going to curtail wages, but it's because these people are too woke. Now, let's keep in mind that at-will employment means that they could do that. But I think that you're not going to hear the same rhetoric from Marco Rubio in those cases.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I guess the real question is this the entry point for a different type of politics? Because one thing I think that frustrates a lot of these people is you don't have to agree with everything as a progressive leftist just in order to qualify as somebody who may speak on labor issues. But in this particular case, it is entirely based within the cultural front. Is that what you think? If there is a GOP labor politics, and it's a huge if, is it going to look a lot more like this?
It's going to look more like this. And I agree. I think that the entryway to union issues can come in a lot of different ways. I know a lot, as being a part of a union when I was at Vox, as being someone who has understood what a union can mean to workers, whether or not you're a group of writers, or whether or not you're a public sector employee, or whether or not you're working in the dish room at a Vegas casino. I've done a lot of reading about Nevada and unionization in the service industry. You could come from a lot of different walks of life and still understand that the union could be helpful to helping your workplace existence. But I think that that's not where this is coming from. This is coming from I want to punish these big companies for not doing the things I want them to do. And the clear implication is that if Amazon started heaving money at conservative organizations or started only selling books that conservatives wanted them to sell, they could bring down people's wages and ask people to work 18-hour shifts and endure extreme working conditions. And it would just be like, well, that's the price of capitalism.
I think that is all well said.
Yeah.
Jane, thank you so much. It's so great to see you. Oh, give us a little plug for
Yes.
your podcast and who you're hosting this week and what it's all about.
Yeah, so my podcast is for the New York Times. It's called The Argument. Today we have a really interesting episode on cancel culture with Robbie Suave and Will Wilkinson, a person who writes about cancel culture and a person who was arguably canceled, though he doesn't think so. We've got some really interesting conversations coming up on critical race theory. What is it, and should it be something we talk about a lot? On hate crimes legislation, I had a really interesting conversation with Brett Stevens about a most recent piece that'll be coming out in a couple of weeks or so. So stay tuned. It's going to be great. You can subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
That's awesome.
Jane
Thank
does
you,
a
Jane.
great job with these. Thank you so
Appreciate it.
much. Great to see you.
Bye.
Well, more Rising for you after this.